What is good, everybody? Charles from Team COG coming at you guys here with the card lore of the World Legacy. So I believe this is from Japan. So I believe like Japan was able to give us the entire lore, the entire story. So all the speculation, all those like World Legacy lore videos. Now it's time to see how close you were. Way back when, I actually did a World Legacy, World Chalice lore video that was very well received, but took a lot of time and effort, and I really didn't enjoy how it came out despite, so I decided to wait. And I never ever thought about reapproaching it, but no need to now, because here, guys, thanks to the YuGiOh organization, the World Legacy lore is here for us. And before I continue, guys, remember, Friday today is the last day you can use the code DEALS, capital DEALS, to get 15% off your orders to get yourself the awesome Girsu Rising, World Legacy World Heroes, and Breathe Before Einstein's playmat, which all fit into the theme of the World Legacy. So with that being said, also, guys, remember to hit that join button down below if you haven't already and you want to support the channel and get some awesome perks and rewards and become a part of a merry band of Crusaders that love to pillage a village, if you know what I'm saying. So go ahead and hit that join button if you haven't. However, if you cannot afford to hit that join button because times are rough, just give me a like and subscribe at the very end of this video if you haven't already, if you so enjoyed it. But without further ado, my guys, ladies and gentlemen, the World Legacy. Page 1. File number 1, the endless repeating tale of the rise and fall of a certain world, which that right there, guys, kind of like intertwines with Dual Terminal. The entire Dual Terminal story is always a constant battle between like death and rebirth, life and death, etc. So the boys and, or maybe it's the boy and girl who barely eked out of an existence in a time of harshness and cruelty, followed the path of the destiny across the world, and eventually became embroiled in a great battle that decided the fate of the entire planet. Let us introduce the tale of that distant star, where people's dreams and desires mix, all circling around a key that was left behind by God. So for you guys who don't know, World Legacy in the OCG was called the Star Relic, and when it came over here, TCG translated to the World Legacy. So there'll be a lot of talking of stars throughout this through the lore. But take note that the stars are just, that's what they were calling the OCG, was Star Relic stars, so the entire theme has to do with the stars. And it's very interesting that the circling around a key that was left by God, because if I remember right, none of the OCG text or anything like that hinted towards there being like a deity or anything like that. So it's very interesting. But like I said, I believe this has all been translated from the OCG, so let's just go down through it. This is going to be a long journey, guys. The creation myth passed down by the Celestial Force. In days of long ago, there was a god who governed the movements of the heavens. That god used the dragons as its vassals to fulfill their duty of maintaining the heavens in a cycle of creation and destruction. However, the power of destruction grew each time it was used, and eventually the balance of power between creation and destruction had collapsed. So my thought that is, so like we have a deity who uses dragons as his vassals, so like the dragons are messengers for him, and they're fulfilling a cycle of the heavens, which is creation and destruction of worlds. And so that's where we are now. There's always a balance. There's always life. There's always death, creation, destruction. The power of destruction had become so great that if it was let loose, it would have certainly destroyed the very heavens it was created to protect. So, you know, like the power of creation and destruction. Destruction eventually, the destruction of life continued, and destruction eventually became too powerful that it would even threaten heaven itself. Now, God decided that it was impossible to govern the heavens by themselves. Using the power of creation, a cage was formed made of countless layers of earthen crust, and the power of destruction was sealed inside. So it seems like creation, God is like this, God is the being of creation, and, no, excuse me, God created creation and destruction as two of forces. Eventually, destruction became the most prominent, more, like, uncontrollable force. And in order to contain that, he practically gave destruction a form and concealed it. And then on top of that, he started to put earth and crust, so making up a planet, it sounds like. Countless layers of earth and crust. The power of destruction was sealed within, and the power of destruction, having lost its way, burned up, transforming into the planet's core. So this destruction that was given a form through anger, through its power, just dissolved, creating the core of a planet. So there we go. Its energy blended together with the power of creation coursing through the land. So destruction then blended in with creation as life and animals were giving birth, you know, all this type of thing. Like it wheedled its way in as acting as a part of creation, it seems. Kind of like metaphorical, it sounds like, to like the Adam and Eve story. And the energy that flowed forth to the surface of the earth, giving rise to life, small existence that repeat the cycle of life and death. God turned the last vestiges of their being into a key. And whose, I guess, is it talking about like creation, destruction, dragons, whatever he did, he turned them into a key, entrusting it to the life that had sprouted across the earth and disappeared. So what it's saying is God gave earth, here's the key to creation and destruction. I'm out. I'm gone. Like, there's this cosmic stuff that I have made, and I'm going to give it to you, which is, like, humanity, which is foul, or not foul, but, like, unpredictable, and I'm going to dip. So, over the countless years that follow, the power of destruction sometimes manifests itself on the surface, but each time, those small lives stood side by side with dragons. So, it seems like so every so many years, destruction manifests. Humanity or life stands with dragons, which in this case are like angels in a way of God, and put destruction back into its place. In time, the key came to be known as a sword, while the power of destruction became known as the Great Darkness. So you have mythology and all that stuff kind of playing into key here. So like just tell, so like the key became known as a sword, destruction became known as the Great Darkness, and then you see this actually in the OCG of Orum's text. It's talking about how like a hero will become chosen, the chosen hero will become the sword that cuts down the darkness. And their story, here you go, and their story was passed down as a gallant epic of the world hero. Starlight hero, raise your sword and gather the light. You must vanquish the great darkness. So now we have the world's ecosystem. So fast forward to modern day, we have the world of like the setting of the world Chalice and Crusadia and all these Orcist, Mech Knights, etc. So the world was ruled by mechanical life forms with 7 Mech Knights standing at the top. The insectoid monstrosities known as crawlers were a prevalent scourge across the land, and life for people was a constant fight against their threat. So right here we kind of confirm that the Mech Knights do not control the crawlers yet. We confirm that Mech Knights are just like these, are at the top of the food chain, the strongest beings on the planet. Crawlers scourge the entire planet, causing life a struggle, so humanity probably had to hide in forests, underground, etc. And here we have pictures of Crawler Spine, chosen by the World Chalice, who is a young man who lived in the Celestial Forest. The World Chalice, Legend of the Rise and Fall of the World, Part 1. Those guided by fate, the people of the Celestial Forest. There was a hidden village of humans in the great verdant forest known as the Celestial Forest. This village, which worshipped the god of the stars, had a sacred staff used in their rites and customs that had been passed down through the countless generations, creating a barrier that protected the village from threats with its power. The successor of the staff at this time was Ib, who had an older brother, Nergisu, and together the two of them spent time with their childhood friend, the young boy, Orum, and a small dragon whelp, Imduk. So there we have the setting for the World Chalice. They live in a forest. The forest is protected by the staff, and the staff, of course, we know through the lore, is a gift or a key given to humanity by God. So these villagers in a forest with the staff that protects them worship the god of the stars, held and true to the old customs, all that kind of cool stuff. And this is where we have our main 3. We have Crowned, Chosen, Guard Dragon, and Orum, which was above. The world heroes and their encounter with the World Chalice. Orum and Yorgritsu, seeking a mean to reduce the burden of upholding the barrier even a little, spent day and night trying to beat back the crawlers. One day, Ib heard a strange, mysterious voice from deep within the forest. Together with her worried friends, Ib headed to the source of the echoes. Here we have World Legacy Discovery and then World Legacy World Chalice. Ib, who slipped deep into the forest, saw what looked like a massive structure of sorts. Her friends caught up to her, and together they approached the structure when suddenly the staff of Ib emitted a dazzling glow, a massive structure coming to life as if a response to it. A small fairy, Lee, appeared before the band, who were startled at the fact the structure was emitting the same kind of light as the staff. And that's why here in like World Legacy Chalice's artwork, it shows that the Chalice is awakening, and that's why the trees are getting blown back and all that kind of fancy stuff. And then we have Lee, the World Chalice, Fairy. We have the World Legacy Heart. Lee bore the duty of leading humanity, but she was thwarted by the Mech Knights and sealed within the World Legacy World Chalice. She then revealed to Ib and her friends that she had been waiting for those who possess the qualities to become world heroes who shall protect this world. So there's Ib spitting lies already, as most of us know. Spitting lies, confusing everything. So here we go. Page 3. Seeking the other world legacies after receiving the power of the World Chalice. You children are the world heroes. Please help me gather the scattered lights of this world and save it from the great darkness. Wanting to protect humanity, they accepted the earnest wish of the fairy Lee, and thus the children of the celestial forest decided to leave their home. The power granted from the World Chalice by Lee allowed them to overpower the crawlers, which up to then they had barely been able to manage to hold off. But there were also 6 other world legacies scattered across the world with similar power. Upon hearing that, once gathered, the artifacts would grant them power to defeat even the Mech Knights. The villagers finally felt hope. Here we go. We have Landmark, Nirgritsu, Aurum, Ib, all of them powered up by the World Chalice. And gotta wait for this to load. There we go. Imduk. The party, this is the party after receiving the power of the World Legacy, as most people, can kind of see here. I'm now noticing in the background here of Imduk, it looks like the bottom of the World Chalice, which is really cool. The second World Legacy Armor. The party then traveled to the wetlands where the next World Legacy lay sleeping. What awaited them, however, was a vast swarm of crawlers, along with the X-crawlers that controlled them. There you guys go. Mech Knights didn't control the crawlers. They're a hive like mine, being controlled by X-crawlers. The team divided their forces beneath the silent gaze of the World Legacy World Armor, and though they found themselves slowly being pushed to the corner, in the end, managed to silence a vast number of insect monstrosities with the aid of the clever Lee. If you World Legacy World Showers, it says a higher grade crawlers appear blocking the way. Crawler Quillark, World Legacy Clash, World Legacy Pawns. They managed to break through the horde of crawlers and reach the World Armor. But page 4, and finally the 7 Mech Knights appear, which if you guys have watched Crush Card's channel, they actually had a very cool analogy. This entire story has a lot of symbolism to like theology, Christian symbolism. All the World Legacy artifacts resemble that are like famous things throughout Christian symbolism, and they actually brought up to something that was kind of interesting, that the 7 Mech Knights, because also consider that one of the Mech Knights is called Morningstar, and Morningstar is translated to Latin as Lucifer, that the 7 Mech Knights is also a parallel to archangels. There's 7 archangels within the Judeo-Christian religion, which is very interesting. The party finally arrives at the World Armor, having given their all and used their wits to their fullest, but then the Mech Knights, the rulers of the realm of machines, suddenly appeared glowing in 7 colors of the rainbow. As Aurum and the others were stunned by the turn of events, things went from bad to worse. The Mech Knights ensnared Ib in an energy that even the barrier abilities of her sacred staff didn't stand a chance. Then they disappeared into thin air, and leaving Aurum and the others behind stunned at what had happened. The 7 Mech Knights. Of course, Red Moon, Orange Sunrise, Yellow Star, Green Horizon, Blue Sky, Indigo Eclipse, and Purple Nightfall. And then here is the World Legacy Trap Globe, where the Mech Knights capture Ib. In search of Ib, they came to a place of 2 World Legacies, which is the World Legacy Shield and the World Legacy Lance. And I think that... Oh, sorry guys, we have a reloading here. So there we go. After Ib and her sacred staff were abducted, Lee told the party it would be dangerous to try to collect the other World Legacies by themselves. So after a long journey and much searching, they arrived at the ruins of a long-lost civilization that the Mech Knights had made their stronghold. There was the World Legacy known as World Lance and World Shield were already active. So we kind of assume that the shield, if you guys can see here in this artwork up here, this tower here looks to be like a Mech Knight tower, and it's latched onto the shield, giving power, And then we have a lance here, which looks like it's been thrown into the water. And we have all the ruined rubble of a city or something here. And then here is World Legacy Scars, where you get to see all the surrounding, which is really cool. And then we have World Legacy Key. Ib had doubts as to the idea that the Mekk-Knights were the embodiment of the Great Darkness, as they refused to harm her even after they kidnapped her and seized her staff. But then, Aurum and the others launched a surprise attack on the Mekk-Knights. So as you guys can see here, Ib is bound, but they're not trying to torture, they're not trying anything, they're just, clearly, it looks like they're after the key, which, I mean, it's the key of God. Why wouldn't they? If the Mekk-Knights are supposed to be these embodiment of good, then why wouldn't they want to get the key of God from humanity? But it seems here, the Mekk-Knights form up to make Mekk-Knight Spectrum Supreme, and then here is the fight between the World Chalice group and the Mekk-Knights. Aurum and the other heroes launched a fierce ambush attack, throwing everything that they had into the fray, but the Mekk-Knights, angered and enraged by them interfering, finally combined into Mekk-Knight Spectrum Supreme in the midst of this back-and-forth battle where even one wrong move could have spelled defeat. Ningirtsu noticed a change and gave a signal to Lee. It was a start of a solo operation that Lee had proposed. So we're on to page 5, the operation proposed by Lee. Ib was relieved to see Lee, who managed to sneak into the ancient ruins by herself and reach where Ib was being held. But then, Ib asked Lee about the truth of the Mekk-Knights and who they really were. And we have this quotation, "Maybe we shouldn't be fighting against the Mekk-Knights." Lee slowly turned back to Ib when she said that. Then she flashed a sadistic smile, dropping that adorable facade that she had kept since when they had first met, and took a much terrifying visage. Excuse me if I pronounce any words wrong. Here we go, World Legacy Secrets. As you can see, Ib turns evil. And then right here, she practically possesses Ib. And yeah, so Lee reveals her true colors as she mentally took control of the body of Ib, causing the two to be reborn as Ib Lee. The Mekk-Knights were aware that Lee had disappeared, but could not afford to deal with her due to being stuck in the midst of a battle. The battle between the Mekk-Knights, who viewed Ningirtsu as the strongest threat, and Aurum, who kept growing stronger, continued. But then a massive explosion occurred inside the ruins. A torrent of incredible power erupted from the World Chalice, greater than any seen before, and then in the next moment she suddenly appeared. It was none other than Ib. But the power that emitted from her, brimming with evil, was a telltale sign that she was no longer Ib. She smiled and told them that she was Lee, and that this body now belonged to her. As well, Ib Lee released a wave of energy, forcibly canceling out the power of the World Chalice she had granted to Aurum and the others, and then she tried to take their lives as well. However, in a twist of fate, the Mekk-Knights chose to oppose her, which is really interesting. So Ib practically takes away the power from Aurum and Ningirtsu, and then the Mekk-Knights turn to face, realizing what had happened. And then we have World Legacy Corruption, where we see the defeat of the Mekk-Knights and the World Chalice Gang, and then World Legacy Succession. But the united form of the Mekk-Knights were undone as they found they could no longer endure the power of Ib Lee. Ib Lee extracted the cores from most of the Mekk-Knights by force and tried to seize the sacred staff sealed inside the core of Blue Sky. As the Mekk-Knights knew the sacred staff was actually the key that controlled the fate of the stars and the very planet itself, Blue Sky attempted to make Aurum his heir in this darkest hour. Aurum opened his heart to the Mekk-Knight and inherited the power of the staff. Now in the hands, the key transformed into a pair of swords. So Mekk-Knight Blue Sky gives Chosen of the World Chalice his power. Then you get Mekk-Knight Avram. Avram inherited the power of the staff. The rematch against Ib Lee. Even though he inherited the key, the power of Aurum became a pair of swords because it was an indirect succession granted to him by Mekk-Knight Blue Sky rather than by the true heir, Ib. When Ib Lee realized that Ib, sleeping deep within her, had the right of succession, she rushed to activate the World Legacy lands before Aurum, who now could use the power of the key. While Aurum managed Taylor, he found himself struggling against the nightmares, mythical beasts created by Ib Lee. However, Ningirtsu, aided by Imduk, managed to catch up with Aurum and the monsters. Together, they struggled to help Aurum as they lost their power of the World Chalice in the previous fight, as everyone rushed towards the World Lance. But in a blink of an eye, Ib Lee managed to activate the World Lance first, launching a terrifying and intense attack against the heroes. So right here we have, which is one of my best friend Caleb's. This is his favorite artwork. Practically, Aurum and Imduk squeeze on by, and then our boy Ningirtsu's here to fight the entire horde of nightmares by himself. I mean, these are terrifying. Look at the size of these things. But anyway, the mystical beast formed by Ib Lee's hand, the nightmares. Ib Lee used the cores of the Mekk-Knights to create beasts from myth and legend, each earning the characteristic of its source, Mekk-Knight. Nyangritsu rushed to the side of Arum as his friends struggled to fend them off and managed to defeat Mermaid in a single deadly blow. He then made himself the target of the other nightmares, giving Aurum a clear path ahead to chase Iblis. So apparently he just yeets Mermaid right away. Maybe that's why we see that Mermaid is not here. And this is so cool because now that this is blown up, like right there is Lance. I never saw Lance before, which is interesting. And I assume, like, now that this artwork's so here, like, this right here must be Iblis. That'd be my guess. So I assume that we just assume that Nyangritsu just whaps the crap out of Mermaid because she's not in the artwork. Ib's will to defy Lee in a tragic conclusion. Lee picked up one of the swords in order to finish off Aurum, who had been injured by the power of World Lance, but the dragon whelp Imduk leapt in front of her out of nowhere. Before its endangered friend Imduk manifested a portion of its power as God's vassal. Even though it was a brief, it forced the spirit of Lee to show itself, paralyzing her, that the spirit of Ib to finally awaken from the dark depths of her own mind. Seeing the fallen Aurum and the sword in her hand, Ib realized what was going on and made a sudden decision, turning the tip of the sword towards her own body and impaling herself. So right here we have Aurum beat it, and I think right here is behind Aurum is the lance. Imduk jumps in front. So dragons, like I said, dragons are supposed to be like the vassals of God. So like, and I guess inherently they have like power connected to God, at least in this storyline. So he practically, Imduk goes Super Saiyan using divinity, which then allows the evil of Lee to be washed away, giving Ib the chance to regain conscience. And then Ib's just like, seppuku is the way to go. And then we have this World Legacy, World Sorrow, where we have this awesome artwork. I mean, it's beautiful, but you can see everyone's feeling like Gritsu's looking just distraught. Arum's probably yelling, wake back up, wake back up. Imduk's like, what? But the power of bonds and feelings, which is the strength of living things, can easily be turned into a weakness. As long as she was in the body of Ib, Orm and the others who had deep bonds with her would not be able to turn their weapons on their friend. Faced with the haughty and arrogant Iblis, Orm grew stronger. The Mekhites stood their determination. Nyangritsu fought bravely, and Imduk awakened a hidden power. Ultimately, the ambitions of Iblis were shattered by deadly irregularities caused by a small glitches stacking on top of one another. However, it was a nightmarish ending for Aurum and his companions, the warriors of the World Chalice. So this right here is saying, even though knowing that these guys would never hurt or never kill her, she had to, turn on herself. And Aurum grew stronger. The Mekhites stood their determination, which means, like, the Mekhites being good, Aurum grew stronger in this. The Mekhites still stand because technically Aurum is still a Mekhnite. Gritsu is fought super bravely. He took on those giant Imduks. And then, of course, fought those giant nightmares. And Imduk awakened his inner power of God or his divinity, which is really cool. Page 7, the disaster that ended the golden age of ancient civilization. So this, guys, is a flashback to Mech Memory, and this is, I told you guys a long time ago that this is not the Crusadia making Mekhnite Morningstar. It is a flashback. That's why it's called Mech Memory. It's a pun on memory or past event. In days long ago, far before Aurum and his friends were even born, millions of years had passed since the time of the creation myth, and humanity had reached the heights of its prosperity. A power great enough to reveal the meaning of life itself. The dragons and their mission to protect the world's resources from being exploited were no longer considered to be a mere myth. It is during this era that the key was unearthed. At first, humanity was excited by the discovery of such a mythical relic, but they soon grew to fear the fact that the excavated key, considering it was a sign of a clash between the world hero and the Great Darkness, actually happened, and decided to analyze the key. So, of course, they believe, oh, it's just stories and fairy tales, and then they get the key, and then So if the key is real, that means the darkness must be real. The scientist Lee made a name for herself across the world as a leading authority of computer science. Her participation as a party of the analysis team allowed them to make remarkable leaps forward in terms of analysis, but no one was aware of her true hypothesis, which fueled her power. Sinful ambitions. One can attain the power of God. The secret hypothesis of Lee was the unseen side of the heroic epic, the true identity of the Great Darkness. The key was actually able to call forth and control the powers of creation and destruction. The common element of the heroic epic of the world hero was that they were able to repel the Great Darkness, but the reverse must hold true as well. Thus, the Great Darkness must also have been created by the key, as its name implied. It must not only have been able to lock the world prison closed, but also to open it. In truth, the heroic epic was actually the history of the conflict of those who fought over the key between those who took on the mission from God and those who desired to revive the power of destruction itself. So there you guys kind of go. Her secret hypothesis was that the key controlled both creation and darkness, and the key was either those who took the mission from God, who locked it away and was to keep the darkness sealed, or those who desired to bring back the power of destruction for themselves, greed. The ultimate Neck Knight that brought about the end. The key analysis team renamed themselves to Crusadia, so I do not believe that this is true. I mean, it's just kind of Crusadia. We see the Crusadia artwork here, but I truly believe this is just hinting that Crusadia is just a assortment or a joint of the multiple races of the world. But anyway, an organization that directly answered to the Confederation. Project Mekk-Knight, a machine soldier development project, was advocated as a measure to deal with the coming threat of the world. Several years later, the ultimate weapon, Mekk-Knight of Morningstar, was created, using the key as its power core. However, something happened when they attempted to turn it on. The key caused the energy of the stars to immediately invert. It flowed into the Earth's core, and this overflowing energy that shattered the crush caused the power of destruction to leak out, and the Earth's surface was scorched black. All of this was planned by Lee. However, just as the Great Darkness was about to be returned, 7 Mekk-Knights built by Crusadia, or the scientists, as a secondary support machines appeared and destroyed Mekk-Knight of the Morning Star. Then they managed to seal the Great Darkness back into the Earth's crust. However, fragments of the divine power known as the Great Darkness remained on the surface in the form of relics known as legacies, each representing portions of its power similar to the key, even though the mastermind behind the disaster, Lee, was discovered to have died. Her scheme had resulted in the damage and ruined land around them being incapable of sustaining and supporting the human race. The Crusadia, or science team, came to the conclusion that the reason that the world hero who could control the power of the key didn't appear in this era was a result of the Earth growing weaker, and thus they decided to focus on restoring the Earth's health and fostering life to spread and diversity. To that end, they gave a command to the remaining Mekk-Knights, giving them orders to suppress human civilization, classifying it as their top priority. The personality data of the staff, Crusadia, was linked via brainwaves to the Mekk-Knights, and with that, the mission to restore Earth began. Thus, Crusadia entrusted their hopes to the future, but there was something they failed to notice. While the body of Lee had died, she had transformed her soul into the world Chalice, which now carried her will and ambitions. So right here, we just have the explanation that they tinkered, they made the Mekk-Knight, it backfired. When it backfired, the darkness started to come out, but then all of it, they made 7 other Mekk-Knights, they rose up, they beat Morningstar, and when they beat Morningstar, they sealed away the darkness, but when this darkness sealed out, that divine power of creation and destruction, both being power of God, destruction, I guess, seeped out and became the World Legacy, World Chalice, World Legacy relics, taking that form in which they were in. And Lee, having this plan all along, had planned to fuse herself with one of those World Legacies, choosing the Chalice. The World Chalice Legend of the Rise and Fall of the World, Part 2, The Power of God and the Future of the World. Crusadia, Revive. Years had passed since the day of that tragedy. While Orym was wounded in the aftermath, Ningirsu knocked him unconscious and took him the body of Ib as well as the sword she impaled herself with. Although Orym was physically and mentally injured, he realized the danger of what Ningirsu planned to do and decided to search for whatever remained alive on their distant star in order to stop Ningirsu from doing something truly irredeemable. To start, he discovered a crawler and restored its functions using the ability of the Mekk-Knights he now carried inside himself and succeeded in melding minds with it. In doing so, he learned the information about several tribes from the records he was able to access from Mind Meld. Orym traveled to the lands to each tribe and learned their legends and their literature, which let him slowly unravel the secrets of this world. Coming to understand the existence of the sleeping power of the stars that both Lee and now Ningirsu sought, in order to counter their ambitions, he asked the leader of each tribe to help him and formed a tribal confederation. The Alliance, likening themselves to the heroic warriors of the ancient civilization, dubbed themselves Crusadias, reactivated the World Legacy World Crown, and began their march. So right here, as we know that Aurum, now probably known as Crusadia Maximus, and Crusadia Draco travel the world, finding each of the separate Crusadias, Arborea, Leonis, Reclusia, and had recruited them to join their cause. And then, when they agreed to, they were able to use the World Legacy World Crown to give them power so that they could go up against their foes. And here we have the artwork. Beautiful artwork. So here we have World Legacy Mind Melt, which is attempting to Mind Melt Crawler. Interesting fact, this card is actually called World Legacy or Star Relics Communion in the OCG. Communion, you know, being a pun on Communion. The Other Inhabitants of the World by Aurum and Company. We have Crusadia Reclusia, which shows a bunch of little other people in the background. Leonis, being a giant Aslan. And then Arborea of the trees. He discovered from the records of the crawler in existence of the Igna Reclusia tribe, the Leonis Hortus tribe, and as well as the Arborea Lacca tribe, who kept the World Crown hidden. In Crusadia Revival, we clearly see that he rallies them to his cause. So, Nyargritsu, who took Ib's body and Aurum's sword. Ever since the day of that tragedy, Nyargritsu was purely driven by a single wish. To him, there was no point in the world without Ib, and if he could see her smile one more time, it didn't matter what he would have to do. Thanks to the cores of the Mech Knights, he recovered from the 6 Slaughter Nightmares. He learned the truth of the world, and by using lost technology, he constructed a body to house the soul of Ib. Next, he decided to create a world fit for her. Driven by the unwavering sense of purpose, Nyargritsu began to build a divine gate. Babel. Here you go. We have the construction here of Galatea, Ib's soul, all that fine jazz. Orchestrated Babel. The start of the World War. So, my favorite part, World Crown being my favorite World Legacy too. The mechanical doll that Nyargritsu ultimately made based on countless experiments achieved replenishment of cellular induction from the corpse of Ib, as well as manifesting the abilities of one of the twin swords that he had taken. Using his mechanical doll, as well as the World Lance, World Shield, and World Armor he had in his possession, Nyargritsu reworked them to react with the World Legacy World 1, forcing it to activate. The final World War was about to begin, and a battle between Aurum and his allies versus Nyargritsu. The Crusadia Alliance obtained the power of World Crown. So when they get the World Crown, it gives them powers. Here we see Magius and Regulus powering up. When Crusadia Maximus gets the power, he becomes Equimax, Magius, Regulus, and Spatha. The Crusadia Alliance, led by Aurum, managed to get help from each of the other major tribes and can together obtain greater power from the World Crown that had been kept secret by the Arborea tribe. Now, worthy of bearing the name Crusadia, they took the fight to Nyargritsu. The Orcus laid in wait for the Crusadia. Aurum approached the tower, sensing the evil that had threatened the world, all the while shuddering in terror of its majesty of the Babel, which reached into the very heavens themselves. But standing between him and Babel was an endless horde of mechanical weapons called the Orcus. They were byproducts of the experiments of Nyargritsu, and they make a suitable vessel for Ib. And with how many he conducted, he had created what could be called an army. The Crusadia Alliance found themselves in a corner trying to fight off his strongest weapon, Orchestron, and in the midst of the fierce battle, Aurum sensed something with the same power of his key emanating deep within Babel. So we have Orcus Brass Bombard, the Symbol Skeleton, Harp Horror, Orchestron, and then we have Orchestrated Einstats, which if you guys don't know, the World Legacy playmat called Breeze Before Einstats shows Equimax reminiscing before this fight, because deep down here, guys, if you can see right where my mouse is hovering, that is Crusadia Equimax charging straight for Orchestron, and we can only assume, since Orchestron's never seen after this, and Crusadia Equimax is that Equimax just one-punched the crap out of Orchestron. The power Aurum had also emitted from Babel. The power of the World won. The shining Babel continued to grow and grow. The real goal of Nyargritsu was not to build Babel up to heaven, but rather to drop the World 1 from orbit in order to destroy the Earth's core via kinetic bombardment. Then, the World Ark, that slept deep within under the ground, would awaken, whose authority over life and death would allow Nyargritsu to revive the soul of Ib, and following that, he planned to release the power of the Great Darkness sealed deep within the Earth's core and use it to transform the revived Ib into the world's new goddess, the Rebuilder of Worlds. Aurum rushed towards the mechanical doll responsible for the initiating of this plan, but found himself blocked by Nyargritsu and his Orcus hordes, and was dragged into a fierce battle. Ultimately, the World 1 did drop, and Earth screamed in agony. So here we have Nyargritsu, we have the World 1, and here we have, it hovering in space. We have the clash between Aurum and Nyargritsu. And here we have Orchestrated Core. where we see right up here where the wand is coming down to crash. The guard dragon is born from the world arc. So the world wand smashed into the earth in a massive kinetic bombardment. The resulting impact the planet asunder, and the warriors of the Crusadia Alliance were caught in the aftershock. However, in order to protect his beloved friends, Imduk unleashed his power once more, power given to him by God, to create a giant barrier at the cost of his own life. After the impact settled, all that remained at the impact site was the Crusadia Alliance and the World Arc, which used its power and authority over death to assimilate the corpse of Imduk, who died beneath it, and remade him as an Andrake. And to make matters worse, the aftershock of the power ran through the crack and exposed the core of the Earth, and reached all the world legacies across the planet, which caused the dragons to awaken. I'm very interested. Like, I don't think I understand that. I thought dragons were supposed to be these vassals of God. I don't get where the dragons became the world legacies. They don't really become clear of that, but the world legacies seem to take the form of dragons. And then here's World Legacy Arc, which of course has based on the Ark of the Covenant. And then here we have Guard Dragon Core Awakening. We have the Guard Dragons, awakening. As you guys can see here, though, this is something very interesting. You see that the other lights over here are awakening as well. The end of the World Legacies was remade into a Guard Dragon. So the World Legacies, which embroidered the authority of God, having absorbed Imduk, transformed in order to exert this very same power God had once created them, they transformed into dragons. So there you go. The World Legacies, which was the authority of God, absorbed Imduk, transformed in order to exert the power of the same God that once created them, and they became dragons. So there you go. That kind of explains a little bit better. And here's like the list of the guard dragons. Lance became Agripane, Armor became Pisti, Shield became Elpi, Arc became Andrake, Wand became Promisance, Crown became Garmedes, and then the World Chalice became Justicia. And then here we have the power of the core, the Cataclysm Go. So, page 11, Lee's soul managed to revive. Nirgutsu, carrying the body of Ib, headed for the mechanical doll. With the power of the key transplanted into it, Nirgutsu was able to control the dragons. Finally, with all the required powers integrated, the soul of Ib was revived with the power that ruled over life and death. Orchestrated release. But the smile on Mechanical's doll face was not the one he wanted. At the very moment he called the soul of Ib back, Lee, who remained as a part of her, took the initiative and seized control of the mechanical doll. Using the power of the key inside her, she erased the soul of Ib. There was no heir of the key capable of reviving God among the humans born of this age of machines. Lee concluded that not even Morningstar was good enough and decided to use the machine civilization itself in order to purge the surface of the Earth. Even humanity's hope for life to take root once more was within the scope of her plans. When the heir who could activate the world legacies finally appeared after countless ages, she schemed again. Stopped once by the heir and her goody two-shoes friends, and that meddling dragon. Sounds like, would have gotten away with it too if it wasn't for you meddling kids and your stupid dog. Her obsession with that power grew even greater and greater and maddening. She absorbed the corpse of Ib and the 5 guard dragons, and having done so, Ib Lee obtained the authority they held, and now finally had the power of God at her fingertips, which, of course, is creation and destruction. Ib Lee called forth the power of God sealed inside the Earth's core, and used it to awaken the central nervous system, Zeus X Crawler. She desired to reign as a complete and perfect God, incorporating the power of God into her very being. World Legacy Guard Dragon Mardark. There's Zeus Crawler coming up from the ground, the core. And with Mardark consumed by the power of death standing in the way, it seemed that the moment all hope was lost. But then, Justicia suddenly flew in from the celestial forest and unleashed its power. It merged with the body of Ib, which was pulled free from Idli, and then the two were reborn as Ib, the World Chalice Justice Scar. As you guys can see here, Justicia just went bam, surprise, and then yeeted out Ib, and there we go. We get Ib, the World Chalice Justice Scar. Long live Ib. Great card. The Vessel with a Heart. In Lee, who had control over all powers and authorities of God, had her power seized from her by Ib. Now dwelling inside of Justicia, the soul of Ib should have been erased during their fusion, but it was actually the soul of the mechanical doll that Lee had erased. Although the mechanical doll was originally made to be a mere vessel, at some point it gained its own sense of identity. most likely because of the cellular induction process. Galatea was the name of the doll destined to become Ib. Secretly gave herself as no one else had even bothered to give her one. Galatea was a name that belonged to a woman who was loved and became a flesh-blood human being according to information she accessed from the records of the ancient civilization. When Lee and Ib fused, Galatea sacrificed her own soul in place of Ib. Meanwhile, the soul of Ib was transferred to the world Chalice, which had later been remade into the guard dragon Justicia. So that's kind of interesting. So, okay, just a lot of mysticism. So, having lost the power of the key, Idli went on a rampage as she could no longer control the massive amount of power contained inside her body, so it rapidly collapsed onto itself. On the other hand, the revived Ib joined forces with Arum and called forth the soul of Imduk back from Mardark. Imduk then evolved into Almerduk, amplified by the power of life itself. However, soon after all their hopes were lifted from the depths of the earth destroyed by X-Crawler feeding on the power from the core, came the world gears, the vessel of God's powers. And I'd like to take a look at this. This looks like a Cleaford stuff, so you can tell it's definitely really closely related to the world legacy, not to the dual terminal. World gears of theological imagery. Standing before world gears, the embodiment of the great darkness, the other name of the power of destruction, Aurum decided to try and fight back. Having once partially inherited the key from Mekk-Knight Blue Sky and with the power of all the world legacies assembled, Aurum decided to strike down the Great Darkness. So here we have Crusadia Testament where everybody is giving him power. He has the full key, blue skies in the background, just all this, cool anime moment. The Spear of the Mech Deity, created in response to the dying wish of Galatea. As Aurum tried to unite the various powers together, Idli sensed it and tried to make one final desperate attack. However, it was Ningritsu who stopped her. In response to the dying wish of Galatea, he used the remains of Babel and his former army of Orcus to forge Ningritsu, the Orcus of the Evening Star. Here we have, the Evening Star lunges from the ground with his spear right into the face of Idli, an orchestrated crescendo, and then out from the ground arose Ding. Birth of the world hero of the creation myth. The attack from the Crusadia Alliance led by Aurum, the unexpected rebirth of Ib, and the final counterattack of Ningritsu, the body of Idli, which had lost all sense of higher thought and reason, was finally destroyed by the attack of Ningritsu. But her very existence continued to cling to the throne of God until the very end, despite losing all rationality or sanity. Now lost adrift in the Sea of Madness, Lee forced her soul to merge with the world gears due to its synchronization with the X-Crawler. However, her body, no longer in possession of the key, was now unable to restrain and control the power the throne possessed, and as a result, the world gears were reacting to the evil will of Idli when completely out of control. So I assume that this is like where the throne of God, maybe, and Idli just went there, and then without having the key which allows us to control the powers of creation and destruction, which God had given, this thing just takes the malintent of the Idli and starts going haywire. Responding to Idli's evil thoughts, it began rampaging. Its existence, which harbored the power of God that could create and destroy worlds and even stars, started to bring about the destruction of the world faster as a result of its leaking power. The world gears, which had become the avatar of destruction, had reached a level where it was no longer possible for it to be held back by the seal of God in the Earth's core, and it seemed like the end of the world was all but certain. But then Aurum, having fully inherited the key, and well as having completely integrated the powers of the world legacy into himself, became the legendary being who had been whispered throughout eternity, Mekk-Knight Crusadia Avermax. In other words, he had awoken as the world hero. Avermax charged straight into the heart of the world gears, where the rampant mind of Lee lingered. There he learned about the truth about the God that created their world. The world gears of theological imagery is actually a prototypical form of all gods. A vessel that does the will of God in response to the will of the being inside it. In short, an apotheosis program. The entity that had previously occupied world gears used it to control and operate the movements of the heaven, but whoever they were, they disappeared in the process of sealing the out-of-control power of destruction deep within the planet. So I guess this right here is like a... How do you put this? This gears is like the throne where God sits, and like it takes on It has the ability of creation and destruction, and it takes on the will of whoever sits into it. So the first person to sit into it was clearly good because it was, they were creating and everything. And then Lee sits in it, and then the throne takes on the malicious content of Lee, which is destruction. That's why it starts going out of control, which is really cool. And here you have cliffhanger where our boy Avram's flying right into it. And now, once more, a crisis had occurred due to its power. If it continued to rampage like this, it would not only destroy the world, but the heavens as well, which, of course, if you remember previously, God had feared that the power of destruction would start touching heaven itself. So Avramex, thinking that because he had become the awakened master of the key, he could control it, completely unleashing its power. Instead of trying to destroy God, he chose to try and become one with the vessel, and thus, Avida, Rebuilder of the Worlds, was born. So instead of destroying this, he decides to become one with it. So instead of sitting in this and controlling this object and playing God, he decides to become God. And this is where theological, the World Gears and Avramex formed to create Avida. The world hero chose to become God and settle everything. So he decided, he's like, I'm going to become God, and I'm going to finish everything. Which is really interesting because, of all the religious symbolism. A newly born god, Avida, armed with the power of God, surpassing all human understanding that he obtained after countless merciless battles, hoped he could restore the original world he used to live on as a human, along with Nergritsu Ib, his Crusadia allies, and all other lives lost in the World War. It might have been a very human and self-righteous thing for a god to do. Maybe it was more of a sensible to punish them by destroying the world, but ultimately he chose to absorb the crumbling world into the vessel, and booted up a restoration program for the life forms born on that world, and then there was light. And God saw that light was good. There you go, there's a little biblical mentioning. So he decides to take all the destructive power from the world, and it's called the World Restoration Program. So instead of destroying the world, a cycle of life and death, he decides to heal the world. And we see the newly born god Avida, which now I know is like Avram, Avida, is, so now it's like Avram became like a new personality and sentimentability because he got all this, now he has all this understanding. He's like, oh, I wanted to save everyone, but maybe now that I can, maybe destroying the world and starting new would be good. But then the memories of all those lost, his allies, his friends, and as much as people would like to ship out Ib and Aram, I think our boy Arborian Aram had a love relationship going on. So instead of destroying it all, he decides to restore it instead of destroy, which is awesome. On that day, in a dazzling light, she lost consciousness. And then when she awoke, what she saw was a calm night sky laid out before her, with a twinkling light of stars gently illuminating the world around her. She embarked on a journey. Sometimes the sword she held would blink and glow with a faint light. What laid ahead on the path it guided her on, no one knew. Still, that girl entrusted her hopes in its blinking light, continued to journey the world he left behind. Lib, the world keymaster. So Avida takes all this energy, all this destructive power, and forms it into the key, the sword that Ib is holding here. And she just wakes up and sees that the world has not been destroyed. It's been, instead of being destroyed, it's been restored. And it's all thanks to Avram, Aurum, Chosen, Maximus, you name it. And all that's left is this power, the legacy left in the sword of like the restoration of everything. Aurum disappeared from the world as the rebuilder of worlds at the end of the World War, but his name is carved into history, leaving behind the key, now in the form of a sword. The battle for the power of God must never happen again. Ib carried the sword, traveling the world, restored by the person that mattered most to her. You know what? I ship both, alright? I ship both. Girsu, the Orcus Mech Knight. Nergritsu, who once walked down the wrong path, was revived as a knight who protects the world. Following the earnest wish of his friends in Aurum, he pledged to watch over and support Ib in secret, with him and the late fairy Galatea snuggled up close beside him. So we have, I guess, I don't know, Nergritsu, maybe it's saying like metaphorically revived as a knight. So like he is now the last Mech Knight. It is his job to defend and protect the world. And that's why also we have Girsu rising, because now it's his time to rise as the final Mech Knight and protect the world. And we have Galatea as a form of fairy beside him. The World Legacy World Key. Due to the effects of the restoration program executed by the Rebuilder of the Worlds, the key that was so entwined with the fate of the world was remade into a sword that absorbed the power of all the world legacies. Ib, the master of the sword known as the World Key, went on a journey to find a place to seal it forever and prevent this tragedy to ever happen again. So the world legacies, all the power of creation and destruction formed into the sword, I'm assuming. And then the world legacy, the power of the rebuilder of worlds, repaired the destruction caused by the great darkness. Countless stars twinkled in the sky, and the breath of life could be heard all around. And Ib, who was given the world key, pushed forward with determination in her heart to where the world legacy leads next. And you can actually get these sleeves from the OCG, and I actually might be doing that now. They're like $30, but once you get them, now that we can double sleeve over here, I think my Crusadia deck with this type of extra deck sleeve would look great. But yes, guys, that is the entire World Legacy story. It's official. I believe it's official, and it's just beautifully done. It's a story of redemption, a story of life and death. Our boy Aurum, starting from the bottom all the way up to the top, sacrificing himself to not destroy the world, but to restore it so that his friends can live. And just great. But we have some notes here. We'll just go ahead and touch base on them. The 0 note at the very top is often used to refer to the world as the World Legacy setting. Konami has also done this with dual terminal storyline. Literally means star, but it's being used in certain contexts here in the way English speakers would say, oh, a distant star, to refer to another world. The number 1, the 1 star it's being translated as celestial force, but can refer to the 5th sign of the Chinese zodiac, the dragon. I'm simplifying it to sacred staff, but Ib's staff is cited as saki, a catch term of all Japanese used to refer to any device or dish used in a religious, ritualistic manner. She calling them heroes of the stars and calling for the scattered lights of the star. A key issue is the World Legacy plot makes references to stars, but the TCG slows replace those references with world, and I'm kind of caught in a bad place. That's what the translator did. And this right here, which is number 4, is being used here. It refers to any confederation of nations of United States or nations such as European Union, the Southern Confederacy, etc. I'm also leaning into fake Latin here. The names of the tribes are the tribe of Blazing Otherlands, the tribe of the Beast King Guard, and the tribe of the Sacred Tree Lake. Star Wars Battle of Stars, it also sounds like Crusade, Holy War, Jihad. And then we just have, this is used at number 7, is the same term used by Kanjo, Sheol, the Orchis, Gritsu, and the Orchis of the Eating Star. It literally means machine god / spirit, but it sounds like, fury, wrathful deity. Gods, Buddhists, Bodhisattvas, and Devas who use their power to destroy forces that stand in their way of enlightenment. I think the word choice here is intentional. This is needed to inference the Japanese name where a star relic leads next as to the World Legacy might give the wrong impression. So there you guys go, the whole World Legacy story. So if you guys enjoy these, let me know. Anytime they release some more stuff, I'd gladly sit down and read it together with you guys. But this is Charles from Team COG signing out.